Good evening, Hanukkah Sameach. We've lit our candles here in Eretz Israel, and now is the time to be together. And I thought, well, let's invite the rest of the world into our living room to be with our candles, because we're in the middle of a series now that's developing as we speak. And it just began as an idea on the first day of Hanukkah, Jewish cultural revolution, because that's what Hanukkah was, a cultural and military revolution. But the cultural always precedes the military, because there has to be a reason that people are going to fight. And we had reasons to fight. The Greeks had reasons to oppress us. We've been through this already 2 nights in a row. This third night, the third candle of Hanukkah, we're going to talk about the Kabbalistic roots of Jewish identity to understand where all this comes from. Now, the Jewish people were not the first country on the world, and they were not the first country that wrote a book, and they had a story and a narrative. But what they were was the first people that claimed it all in the name of one God. Now, monotheism itself began with the first man because he was a prophet. God spoke to him, he spoke back. And Adam wasn't confused about other gods. But slowly, the human race discovered that there's power in the universe that you can access for your own desires, even without the divine stamp of approval. But nonetheless, the Jewish people were born out of a milieu, a culture, or a multinational culture of different types of idol worship, it's called. And we could call it occult practice. We can call it demonology. There's no end to the types of practices that were extant in the ancient world at the time that the Jewish people emerged. But when did they actually emerge? With Abraham? With Isaac? With Jacob? 4,000 something years ago? Well, the rabbis say that the Jewish people emerged when they came out of Egypt. That's when they became a nation. But when they went into Egypt, well, Jacob went in. He was the patriarch at the time, and Jacob had 70 souls with him. And those 70 souls in the Kabbalah teach us 70 faces of the Torah. So a soul has its window on the Torah. Each soul has a way of seeing the writing and seeing the commentary. And that's why when you sit down with any group of Jews that know the books a little bit and you start talking, you'll get 70 different opinions real easy. And they're all interesting and they're all enlightening. And that's why we learn from each other and we grow. Now these 70 souls that went down to Egypt, right, that became 3.2 million that came out of Egypt with Moses, of course, they were broken up into the 12 tribes. Now, the 12 tribes, they were actually 13, and Joseph was elevated to the level of a patriarch. So he had 2 sons that became Manasseh, the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay, so we have 12 tribes that came out of Egypt, and they went eventually into the land at the time of Yeshua, after they, of course, received the Torah at Mount Sinai. Now, these 12 tribes, they were brothers, but they were extremely different, and we see the qualities of their differences, of their personalities and their talents and their inheritance and their relationship to the land of Israel in the blessings that Jacob gave each of the tribes. So each tribe was geographically bound to the land. And there were the tribe of Zebulun, which would work the coastline. And we have the tribe of Asher that would work the hills of Galil, where many, many powerful, growing, olive oil giving trees are still there today. Giant trees, amazing. If you're ever in Israel, you have to see the ancient olive trees. Now, and those are just 2 of the tribes. And each tribe got a blessing according to who he was and his role in the nation in the founding of the Jewish people as they came out of Egypt. Now, each of those tribes, we understand also, there were 4 different mothers. So each one had the qualities of their mothers, and that made more distinctions. And those 12 tribes had a genetic lineage distinction and a geographic distinction, but in Kabbalah we go further. We say that God created an image called the divine man, and that became the blueprint of all human beings after. And that divine man has 10 major traits. Now he has many more in detail, but 10 major traits that correspond to 10 sphirot, spheres of energy in his body, in your body, in everyone's body. Now these 10 are called the sphirot, and these 10 actually, they break down into 3 groups. The 3 on the head, which are the mental powers, and then the 7 below, or the 6 below, which are the extremities of direction, and they correspond to the emotional powers. And then there's kingship, the 10th power, which is the power of expression into the world, to do things with your hands and your feet and your mouth. Okay? And so that's called kingship, the ability to turn something spiritual into something physical, to activate a system. Okay, so the lower 7 each have their own 10 sphirot, and that 7 times 10 equals 70. And this represents the mixing of the traits of those 70 souls that went down to Egypt. When they came back up, they were already fully developed as tribes. They were already unique in their qualities and their powers and their distinctions. And so what we're trying to do form here is to understand how who we are is not just because we choose to be who we are, or just because of our genetic lineage, but rather it's also because God designed us with the land in mind. That the land is broken into 12 different regions according to these tribes, because the land itself has power, spiritual power that emanates from it. And so each one is different and unique and uniquely shaped from and for each of the 12 tribes. Now these 70 souls, which are the 70 faces of the Torah, 70 ways of looking at any piece of writing that we considered part of the 24 books of Moses. Well, actually 24 books of Tanakh. Moses only had 5. Okay. But these are also, I call them camps of Jewish identity. So what's a camp of Jewish identity? What does this phrase help us? Well, we know today we have different camps in the Jewish world. We have Sephardi, which means the collective Jews that were raised and grew up around the Mediterranean culture. Then we have the Ashkenazi, which were the Jews that basically were raised and brought up in the Northern European culture. And then we have Jews from America, Jews from the South America, South Africa. There's really an endless number of Jewish cultural communities. However, what's the bit with the identity? Well, the identity is really based on how each group does things, how each group interprets the Torah, interprets the culture. And that goes back to how you dress, how you eat, how you pray, what Torah you learn, how you interpret the Torah you learn, which rabbis you follow, which rabbis you don't follow, which synagogues you will pray in, which synagogues you won't. All of these distinctions, they're just part of being human. But we see that they're fully expressed in today's modern world. But there's a difference. There's a big difference. And this is part of what I call the Jewish cultural revolution. The difference is we received our identity from a culture that we didn't know. And then we received a piggyback culture that we got by being raised in foreign lands. But now that half the world Jewry lives in the land, something new is happening. We get to choose who we want to be. And we're not necessarily choosing who we want to hang out with and who we want to be and who we raise our children with and which schools we go to and which synagogues we go to. We're not doing it because our fathers and our grandfathers did it anymore, because they're not around. A lot of people are making their choices because of other reasons. And those other reasons constitute a cultural revolution. And what does that mean? That we choose where we live and how we pray and what customs we have based on the teaching that most inspires us. So if you have a person that loves prayer, he will seek out teachers that focus on prayer. And if we have a group that loves to do kindness for other Jews and other people in general, then we'll have another group. And then if you have a group that says, no, Torah learning is the most important thing, then they'll seek out teachers that emphasize that. So it becomes down to now a prioritization of what is most important to you. And that's the groups that we choose. And that's the kind of culture we're building here. And it's organic. It's happening on its own. When a person chooses to buy a house in a certain neighborhood, when in America, every time you got a pay raise, you change neighborhoods, right? And you got a bigger house. So, the more dad went up the ladder, the more neighborhoods we changed. That wasn't particularly socially stabilizing for a teenager back in the day, but that's okay. We got over that. But the idea is that you're moving along the social ladder according to the money you make. And in Judaism, it really doesn't work that way. It works along the continuum of your relationship to God, your relationship to the Torah, which mitzvot you think are more important, the thinking mitzvot, the feeling mitzvot, the action mitzvot. So you see, we're choosing from a different set of parameters. Now, within those parameters, there's more of them. And these are all part of those 70 faces of the Torah. So you see, the Jewish people is becoming something else, something new, something universal, and something broadband. From the most religious to the least religious, but we're all Jews. From the most, aduk is the word in Hebrew, that it means attached to certain practices over others, certain interpretations. Is your interpretation according to the Zohar, or is it according to the rabbis of Lithuania or the rabbis of Philadelphia? That also changes your social group and your identity. So your identity is emerging from a different set of choices than it did when we came out of Egypt. Because those choices were already made for us when we came out of Egypt. And now we're coming back from all over the world, so we have an whole other set of choices to make. How long your beard is going to be. That's one of them. The hat you wear. Are you going to allow yourself to wear, my Cultural Revolution leather jacket? Someone said, you can't wear that, Avraham. It's a leather jacket. You're a rabbi. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? I said, this jacket's seen more revolutions than Karl Marx. But the point, of course, is that we are free to choose. And that represents mature decision-making. That we're now no longer children being told what we're to do because our parents and our grandparents did it. We're choosing because we are free adult individuals with a set of values that we've earned, that we've worked for, that we've paid for. And those values help us define, who we're going to be, where we're going to live, what we're going to learn, who our rabbis are going to be, what synagogues we go to, and all the other questions that we already went through. So you see, this is spiritual maturization, if I could use a more fancy word. Because we're maturing as individuals in our relationship with God. And Rabbi Nachman says that God runs the world better and better as time goes on. Now, how could that be? God is perfect always. No, but what does he mean by running the world better? It means he's revealing himself more and more specifically to the individual in the choices that he needs to make. Because when you don't know anything, you're an open vessel to receive. And that's really the ultimate place to be with Hashem, an empty, open vessel, so you can receive his inspiration for the things that you need to do in this life. Now, these parameters of lifestyle are an outgrowth from these identity choices. So your lifestyle is also going to reflect that. The kind of car you drive, how much money you're going to put in your house versus your education, which kind of health insurance you're going to get, which doctors you'll use. Every single choice you make has a connection all the way back through the system. Your financial ambitions, your advisors, the clubs you join, the museums you go to. They're all part of a set of choices. There are museums that I went to once and I said I will never go there again because of what I saw. And then there's other places that I will go back over and over, even though I've seen it over and over, because it's appealing to something that I find important. So you see, it's about personal emphasis, which is, again, spiritual, metaphysical maturity. You get to choose who you want to be. You get to choose the life that you want to live. That's part of redemption. That's part of coming back from exile. So we're in the midst of this Jewish cultural revolution, whether we like it or not, whether we see it or not, whether we call it that fancy name or not. It's still there. It's happening in front of us. Now, this also has to do with how we form a relationship with the nations of the world. Do you hate the non-Jews? Do you love the non-Jews? Do you respect them? Do you honor them? Do you dishonor? Each person has new choices towards his relationship to the various nations that make up this planet, whether they're Arabs and they have terrorist groups across the hillside, or whether they're non-Jews up in Calgary, Canada, who are more interested in, the stockyards are very big up there. So I imagine it's the beef commodity market that swings day over there. However, when we come back to it, a big part of the choices we make depends again on your relationship to the Torah and how you want to serve God. And you're going to naturally gravitate towards people who do want to serve God like you do. And that's the way it's supposed to be. So there's no place for prejudice. There's no place for separations, because we're making the distinctions on our own. And we don't have to make separations because the distinctions are part of who we are. So this type of growth, I think, is phenomenal, and I think it's new in the world for the Jewish people. I think that it's something that's never happened before, that we've all come home from all over this world. I mean, you can walk down any street in Israel and hear 5 or 10 languages in one little piece of a block, if you sit on a bench and just listen to people talking. For sure, you'll hear English, Hebrew, Amharic, Russian, French, and Arabic without even having to count. And it's so on and so forth. And they're all bringing back pieces of themselves from the exile, of their relationship to Hashem. Now, where is this going to take us? Well, when we understand the Kabbalah on a deeper level, how the energy flows through the tree of life, then we'll understand more about what Messiah is, more about who Abraham was, and who Moses was, and who Jacob was. Because how the energy flows through the tree will affect each and every one individual, because we're part of that tree. And everybody has a different root, and their root is attached to that tree in a different place. So some of us are channeling the power of King David, and some of us are channeling the power of Moses, and some of us are powering the channel of Avraham Avinu, and so on and so forth, because that's how the nation is set up. And if you don't see it, you just have to look a little deeper in yourself and look into the archetype personalities that founded this people. And you'll see that we are on the move. We are on the rebirth, and it's only beginning. It's only beginning. You think, well, we've had the Jewish state's been around now for 74 years. No, that's just the beginning. And we've got, hopefully, maybe 1,000 or maybe 2,000. There's different opinions in Kabbalah, how long before the world's actually going to elevate to a new level. Some say by the end of this millennium, the year 6,000. Some say there's another 1,000, another 1,000, another 1,000 that form part of the human race evolution. As we become more and more godlike and less like our fellow four-legged friends here on planet Earth. And so that's going to be, a little further into the future. And, maybe we'll be here in different forms then we'll talk about it. But it will be interesting. Until now, Pay attention to the 70 faces of Torah and of personality, the different styles, the different qualities, and you'll notice that which attracts you is in you, and that which you don't like or is not interesting to you, it's not as powerful within you, because each person's soul is a direct reflection of its relationship to this tree. And when we see that, we have a new basis from which to make our choices. And it's no longer the old-fashioned way of doing things. Oh, I'm a carpenter because my dad's a carpenter. I wear this coat because my dad wore this coat. I drive this car because my dad, that's very superficial, my friends. The deep level is to know who we are based on where we came from on the inside and what we're here to do, what our role is, what our mission is. And when you find that, you're a happy person. Hanukkah Sameach. We'll see you again with this series tomorrow night. God bless you all.